Okay, it's getting to that time now, huh?
We have to consent.
Okay, we're gonna start with the launch, and I'm going to welcome everybody to the launch and Q&A of Able Muse 29. I'm your host, Ellen Brown, joining you from sunny Massachusetts, at least it is today. And just over a year ago, I was invited to join Able Muse as an associate fiction editor. It's been an honor to work with the team and Alexander Pepple, the beating heart behind it all, and a gentleman I'm delighted to introduce you to now. Alexander Pepple founded and edits Able Muse and Able Muse Press, and also founded and directs the Eratosphere online workshop. His poetry and prose have been or will be published in Borough Street, Hopkins Review, Rosebud, River Styx, American Arts Quarterly, Light, Think Journal, F&E, Per Contra, Eclectica, Measure, and elsewhere. He edited the Able Muse anthology, Able Muse Press 2010. So thank you, Alexander. And if you could unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Lorna. It's a pleasure to have you all here today for another Able Muse inauguration reading. We did this about a year ago, and it was quite a huge success. So I said, why not? Let's do it again. So I'm glad that we have Lorna to look over the proceedings this afternoon, and she's already been doing a great job so far. So I guess I have to remind you that the new issue, most of you must have it now, and it was through the work of all the beautiful work that you all sent in that we're able to make this happen. And also another reminder is that the Able Muse Book Award is still going on for another few days because of an extension. So if you have a manuscript and you're interested in having the judge look over it for this year, the judge is Rachel Hadas. So feel free to go to ablemuse.com and follow the links. Well, without further delay, I will let the proceedings start. And with that, take it over, Lorna.
Thank you. So yes, anybody who hasn't got Able Muse 29, please go to ablemuse.com. And just for the writers and poets out there, we're still open for submissions until July 15th. So we have plenty of time to send in your work, and we're eager to read. Before we start, I'd like to go over just some of the process for today. After each reading, myself or the section editors will have a brief question and answer session with the readers. At the end, we'll follow up with a Q&A so everyone will get a chance to ask readers questions. I'll have everybody on mute. Can you please try and remember to unmute yourself when you're being introduced before you're about to read, because I may forget to do that. But so without further ado, the first section is nonfiction, is Michele Cacho-Negrete. Michele Cacho-Negrete is a retired social worker in Portland, Maine, and is the author of Stealing: Life in America, winner of the Hope Award and runner-up in the Brooklyn Literary Arts Contest. She's had over 90 publications, 2 in the Best of the Net, 5 in anthologies, and 4 among the best American essays, most notable. She's particularly thrilled at being an Able Muse, a favorite journal, and we're thrilled to have her. So her piece is on page 81, if anybody would like to follow up.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Alex, for all your help when I first submitted. You were very, very patient, and I am very delighted to be reading for Able Muse. This is probably the shortest piece I've ever written. I am the city that never sleeps. I am the city that never sleeps. My thoughts a rampaging subway making unscheduled stops. I am the multitudes of this city that never sleeps. I am the child tossing to the lullaby of shrieking fire engines that never go quiet. I am the teenager running the streets in a tattered jacket, hiding her developing body. I am the hippie, wandering from folk singer to radical films to marches in the park. I am the wild-haired girl waving her hands in the air, dancing to Steely Dan. I am the clueless young mother, pushing a baby carriage through rain and snow and intense city heat to escape the island of isolation. I am the relentless activist, marching, singing, talking, yelling, teaching, wondering why there is no justice. I am the student, accepting the degree of accomplishment that is only a means to an end. I am the mother working endless hours to help her kids through college. I am the writer, struggling for reconciliation between these angry, sleepless denizens inside me who are spent by unraveling hours of insomnia. I am the city that never sleeps, watching decades of sunrises ripping sooty, smokestack encumbered skies, alienated suburban developments, lonely rural potholed roads, sleepless still in the city of silence and space.
Oh, beautiful.
Thank you, Lorna.
When I was reading Rhina Espaillat's interview, I came across a line that made me think of your piece straight away. And it said, I discovered the current of shared meaning under the music, the pain under the play, and the fact that poetry, when it sang, very often sang because the author was trying very hard not to scream. So, and then we have in your piece, tossing to the lullaby of the howling fire engines, sunrises ripping sooty, smoke-stacked, encumbered skies. I couldn't help wonder, did you ever consider this as a poem? Was it always nonfiction? And how did you decide between those two?
Because I've never written anything that's really a poem, it wasn't hard. I recognize that my sentences are just about always considered poetic, but I don't have that sense. I have a number of friends who are really, really great poets, but I don't have the sense of all of the nuances of poetry. And so this particular piece would have come the closest to being a poem, but I did with it what I know how to do best, which is to make it into a nonfiction essay.
Okay. And the city, and can you tell me about the city? What cities, like Portland? It doesn't make me
Now I
think
live in Portland, Maine, right? But in speaking about I am the city, I think all of us are cities that house all of ourselves, and that there are things that travel along with us. What I'm pointing out in here is sleeplessness, but all of us, there are things we shed, but there are things that we always carry with us, and including who we have been for all our lives.
Okay, lovely. I don't know if any of the editors want to ask more questions, or we wait until the end of the reading to ask more questions. So the next reading is fiction. Unfortunately, two of our fiction authors couldn't make it today, but in the last weeks they've spoken to me about the inspiration behind their pieces, and I feel that the launch of Able Muse 29 wouldn't be complete without mention of their wonderful stories. So I want to thank Rob Wright, our fiction editor, who will read Jonathan Starke's Penitence. That's on page 7. Rob has been awarded 3 fellowships from the Pennsylvania Council of the Arts and has twice been nominated for the Pushkin Prize. His writing has been published in Able Muse, Angle, Big City Lit, the Evansville Review, Measure, and Spring Poet, among others. His poetry collection, Last Wishes, was published by Able Muse Press and was rewarded for the Frost Farm Prize for metrical poetry. So Rob is going to read for us Penitence, page 7.
Thank you, Lorna. I'll read Jonathan's bio first and then read the story. Jonathan Starke is a former boxer and nomadic traveler. His writing has appeared in The Sun, Missouri Review, Three Penny Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, and Gettysburg Review, among others. His debut novel, You've Got Something Coming, received the Black Heron Press Award for Social Fiction. Penitence. Never saw my father bleed before, but there it was, running down his cheek in a wavy line. The first drops drew breath from the crowd. I heard it in gasps. Their voices sucked out like wind pulled through a tunnel. It mattered to them, this blood, because they'd never seen a centaur bleed. It mattered to me because I was of that blood. My father held a closed fist up to his eye, rubbed at the blood with his knuckle. The leaking smear pinked down his cheek. He was boxing a giant called Axio Map Avamboa, or tall as an Avamboa tree. Axio smiled when the blood came. My father reared on his hind legs to create distance and walked backwards until he touched the shaking ring ropes. I wasn't supposed to be at that fight. I wasn't supposed to know about it. But after my mother left us, my father would go away each night, tell me to stay inside and tend to my weaving, skin apples for drying and turn over the fire. And I did those things for weeks, for months. And at some point, I thought my mother would come back, that I was skinning fruit for her pies and weaving cloth for her to cut and shape and make into winter garments. The only thing that came through that door was my sweaty and welted father, his coat often dusty, his tail full of swatchkoo burrs, stinging in his eyes. And after, he'd take his shoes off, the 4 clanks they'd make. He came into my room and smoothed my hair and warm his hands and settle onto his belly on the floor and wait out the night. My mother was human like me, and my father would say nothing of her leaving, except that sometimes you have to learn things young, and sometimes mothers don't come home. And sometimes daughters have to follow their fathers out into the blue haze light of the evening between stone buildings and paths worn deep as dirt canals, because we just want to be let in. We just want to know. And so my father took the beating, and all I could do was watch from the hill overlooking the small open air stadium, watch as Axio circled and punched my father's crooked nose and big ears. And the more punches that came, the more the crowd pounded the floor with their feet. And when Axio missed, they booed him. And when he didn't, they roared against my father's teetering body. When my father was backed up against the ropes, Axio stepped closer. He dipped his body down and threw a punch under my father's chin, each blow scattering blood drops from my father's face. I felt each one take away the tickling of his fingers, how he'd reach down from high up to cup my chin, tell me there was angel softness in my bones. My father dropped to all fours and put his head down for a charge, pushed off the ropes and moved Axio back a few feet. He swung at Axio's body, but the blows were dodged or blocked. So my father rose on his hind legs, throwing his length and beauty and reaching up into his punches, catching Axio on the chin a few times and on the forehead and temple. But there was so much strength in Axio. He took the shots and pushed my father away. And my father stayed on the outside near the ropes, galloping around the ring, his tail swinging, his movements precise and evasive, as if giving himself time to form a plan or disorient the giant. When Axio grew tired of the galloping, he cut off my father in mid-stride and punched him in the liver. It buckled my father, and his back legs shivered and went out. Axio stepped in with a blur of punches to the torso and head, and I recognized that my father was dying then, the blood coming from his nose and the yellow liquid from his ear. The crowd kept stomping and buzzing, the blur of fists swinging, my father staggering on the skinny front knees, shaken and beaten. So I stood up on my human legs and yelled down the hill, "Stop, stop." But though the distance and the fury of the noise, I was sure nothing could be heard. And so I breathed in all the wind I had, cut my hands around my mouth, and yelled my father's name, "Tacho, Tacho." And though the fury of punches, he looked up into the stands as if startled. My voice, so much like my mother's, and he died this way on his knees in the dirt, his bloody mouth open, his eyes frantically searching the crowd as he always must die, looking for her. And I've been asked to comment on what I liked about this, and I was just struck from the first moment I read it, from the first encounter I had with it, how what a wonderful evocation it is of the death of mythology for one thing, but the brutality of crowds, the challenge of a child caught between two worlds and what they must face. And though it's an extended metaphor, it's woven so deftly and with such pathos that I was just spellbound from the first line to the last. And I'm certain my fellow editors were, and of course, as any readers who discover this wonderful story would be. And I think Jonathan's experience as a boxer, as he said in the bio, served him well in the descriptions of this fight, for the action was completely believable. And I love the last line, how he says, Jonathan writes, searching the crowd as he always must die looking for her, as if this isn't just one death, but this is a series of deaths, or a death that he might experience every night. So it's just a wonderful story. And thank you, Lorna, for choosing it and sharing it with us. And it was an honor to be asked to read it today.
Thank you, Rob. It was great to find that story in submissions. And when I was talking to Jonathan, I asked him what made him decide to have his father as a centaur, and he said that he and his brother, they grew up without a mother and were raised by the single father, which is probably why he sees his father in kind of mystical way, like the centaur. And he tends to write about the empty space that comes with the absence of a female figure. He wonders if we often write about the things we love and the things we never had, or the gaps inside us that leave us quietly wrecked. And I think this story can leave us quietly wrecked too. So the gaps, kind of the idea of gaps, everything else is in Randy Nelson's Something for Serafina also, but in a different way. His story is on page 126 if anybody wants to look at it, but I'm just going to, Randy can't make it, so I'm just going to talk about it briefly. For Something for Serafina, it's more about a gap between reality and the ability to understand or comes to terms with it. In the beginning of the story, we're told, in the year before I arrived, 126 albinos were murdered in Malawi, most of them children. Many had been kidnapped and sold before being butchered. And yet when we meet Serafina, she explored, and whatever she touched rose in price. Why, I asked, but no one would answer, although I noticed that the word Zulu followed us from stall to stall. It was the first Bantu word I have ever learned. It means ghost. So at the beginning, when I talked to Randy, he said that over and over in his stories, what happens is that somebody cannot imagine the word as it's perceived by someone else. Often that is the character simply refuses to accept the world around him. The narrator Dante in this story has a very American viewpoint at the beginning of the story, and he needs to make some room in his imagination for the reality he encounters. A reality that includes the slum, which is this wasteland, was more like a city in someone's diseased imagination. The slum and this flight of Serafina into this wasteland. So by the end, the narrator has a different viewpoint. He has become part of Malawi, and he leaves the American viewpoint behind. But so our fiction editor Tim Wright, who was lucky enough to find this story, said when he came across Randy's story, he was immediately intrigued by the first paragraph with its dense but fluid imagery. The theme of race and color is quickly introduced, and then albinism too, which is a rare topic in fiction. the smooth language and deep philosophical insights about the treatment of albinos in Malawi drew him further into the story. So Something for Serafina is a beautifully written, captivating story that is profoundly moving up to the end. He said he wishes he had written it himself. I'm sure many have. And this brings me to Amina Lolita's Katia's winning story and the graceful movement towards that wonderful last sentence that I think is amazing. So I want to make sure that Amina is here. Is Amina here?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great, Amina. So Kodia is the author of 3 short story collections. She is the recipient of the Eric Hoffer Legacy Award, the Phyllis Wheatley Book Award in Fiction, the International Latino Book Award, and the Chicago Library Foundation's 21st Century Award. And she will be reading her story. I just have to make sure I find the right page for it, sorry. We Ask Why on page 37. Thanks.
All right. I'm just gonna be reading the first 2.5 pages. I think that will take me to 5 minutes. Right? We ask why. Come summer, we're getting packed up and shipped out, sent off to Puerto Rico, where our father has long been living. We haven't seen our father in years. We have no desire to see him now. We ask our mother why we have to go and give up our fast approaching summer. We ask why she can't just leave well enough alone. We've already made our summer plans. We've aired out our bathing suits and shower shoes. We're ready for horseplay at the nearby public pool, for holding our breath underwater, for playing Marco Polo, for trying to dunk every kid we see. We're ready for the deep end of the pool. This is better than going to the pool, she says, setting out our after-school snack. You'll have beaches instead. There's nothing but beaches there. We ask if we can't just go to Coney Island or Rockaway Beach instead. She says, we're never going back there. Last summer, those beaches were overrun by medical waste, polluted by the hypodermic needles and syringes that washed ashore. We were used to the occasional baby diaper floating by as we played in the water, but needles filled with AIDS were where our mother drew the line. The beaches where you're going will be clean. We ask her how she knows if she's never been there. All she says is, trust me. But how can we trust her after she's pulled this dirty trick of waiting until our summer vacation was close enough to taste and then dropping this surprise on us? We were hoping this would be the summer we'd be tall enough to ride the cyclone in Astroland Park. But instead of speeding down curves, loops, and turns of the wooden roller coaster, we'll be going to LaGuardia to fly to a place we've never been, to see a man we convince ourselves we don't even miss. We push away our plates and try to change her mind. We tell her we'll be bored. She says, I can't make either one of you interesting. We tell her we'll be lonely. She says, you'll have each other. We say that's not enough. We'll miss hanging out with other kids and don't want to leave our friends. She says, there will be plenty of kids. You'll get to meet your other brothers and sisters. We ask how many. She says, 4 so far, at least as far as I know. She says, your father doesn't waste time. She leaves us in the kitchen with our questions and heads off to her room. We follow and watch as she pulls down the suitcase from the top of her bedroom closet and carries it down the hallway and into our room. We linger in our doorway as she starts to pack our bag. From the bottom of our closet, she pulls out sneakers, sandals, and jellies. From our lower drawers, she takes out t-shirts and denim shorts. From the upper drawer, she pulls out undershirts, underwear, and folded socks. She packs like she means business. We ask if we really have to go. She says the tickets are paid for, which means there's no way out. We ask why she is doing this to us. We don't even know him, we say. She says, of course you do, and balls 8 pair of our socks, tosses them into the belly of the suitcase, changes her mind, and takes them back out. We knew him once, when we were babies, when we were toddlers, when he was simply there and we didn't know that time with him would wisp into memory. We do not remember his face. We cannot recall his touch, his kiss, his voice. We have no memories of his love. All we know is that we'll be flying alone without her, wearing tags around our necks so the flight attendants know to keep an eye on us as we, unaccompanied minors, accompany each other to see our father because our mother wants us to have a relationship with him, even though she couldn't. We ask why she chose him in the first place. We ask why they married. We ask if they were in love. I was, she says. I think he was too, for a time anyway. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I'm kind of disappointed you didn't get to the very last sentence because I just love that sentence. I think the whole story is just moved towards that. And I think the fact that in earlier on, the mother says, all she says is trust me, like trust me, trust me. And then it ends up with her saying, how could I possibly know? So it's this idea of wanting to trust your parent and then having the rug pulled from under you. Do you write moving towards that sentence? Did you know that it was going to be there, or did that just come?
No, I never know the end when I start writing. So it just came through the series of questions.
Yeah, nice. And was it always a plural? Did you always have plural? I mean, it adds to this whole crisis of child identity and parenting, the parentage, to have we there, to have the mass rather than single. So was that always a decision that you had, or did that change?
Yeah, I always knew that it was going to be two siblings, and I didn't want it to be clear whether the boy or the girl was speaking. You know, they're at that age where, you know, they're kind of androgynous. So like, you know that one of them is a girl because there are some jellies being packed. But I wanted them to just sort of have the same voice, have the same mind. So you don't know if they're twins or if one of them is older than the other, but they're just so closely aligned as siblings that they have the same voice.
Lovely, thank you so much. There are going to be more questions and answers later. So now we're going to move on to the poetry section, and I'm very happy to introduce our poetry editor, Richard Wakefield, who's going to introduce the first 4 poems. It's kind of a bittersweet situation since because Richard Wakefield, this is his last issue that Richard will be working on with Able Muse, unless we can get him back. So Richard Wakefield has earned his PhD in American Literature from the University of Washington and has taught college humanities for 42 years. For over 25 years, he reviewed poetry, fiction, and literary biography for the Seattle Times. His first collection of poems, East of Early Winters, won the Richard Wilbur Award. His second collection, A Vertical Mile, was shortlisted for the Poets Prize. His third collection, Terminal Park, will be published by Able Muse this April. So thank you, Richard.
Thank you. And I believe we're starting with Michael Spence, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I will introduce this poem. I'm going to say first a little bit about Michael and then just a few comments about the poem itself, which I hope doesn't steal any thunder. In 2014, Michael Spence was awarded a literary fellowship from the Artist Trust of Washington State. His 5th book, Umbilical, St. Augustine Press, 2016, won the New Criterion Prize. And this poem is called Tabula Rasa. And I'd like to say, among so many things to appreciate, I like the way this poem unfolds into a story. The opening moments are familiar, if rarely so vividly expressed, to almost anyone, regardless of age, but especially to those whose lives have become so routine that much is done below the level of our awareness. That's a euphemistic way of saying old. The rationalizations too are familiar. Then we learn something about this particular person, that he has made a living, maybe a fortune, by falsehood. That is, by screwing around with the reality that is now screwing around with him. And of course, that's the way the title, The Blank Mind, and of course, there's the way The title, the blank mind, and the gravestone cohere as if a photograph were snapping into 3 dimensions. So without any more ado, I would like to introduce Michael Spence and his poem Tabula Rasa. It's on page 90 for those who want to read along.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks to everyone, Alex, and everyone involved with the magazine for taking the poem and allowing me to be in such a beautiful publication. It's really amazing, and I'm very glad to have it here. I'm glad you liked this poem too. Tabula Rasa. Did he brush his teeth already? He rubs his thumb along the rows of plastic bristles. Damp, so yes. It isn't so remarkable a task. He does it morning and night, but he ought to know the answer automatically. He used to have a mind sharp as a bear trap. Greased by their greed, it snapped on the feet of those lured by his bait. Insurance scams, trading tips from insiders guaranteeing 20%, fortunes needing a deposit to be claimed. Shampooed his hair in the shower, the cap on the bottle, he decided to leave it off to prove he'd used it. Or did he just forget to close it the last time he scrubbed his skull, the one that's feeling emptier each day? He's walking into rooms to find something. That crap has gone on for some time now, as if his passing through a threshold washed away the thought of what he hunted for. The last few years, a sort of black magic has possessed his wallet, glasses, keys. They disappear from where he knows he set them. He's sure of it, and rematerialize in the same spot only after he's searched a goddamn house. He tells himself he's distracted. That happens to everyone now and then, but now and then's becoming all the time. He goes back to the first room he was in as if he can pick up the trace of what he's after, like the scent of a chunk of cooking meat. All the money he made, it's in the bank now, but under whose name? He used an alias to baffle the IRS. The sands of time are scouring the walls of his mind. Soon they'll be blank as the slab of slate waiting for his final chiseling.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Michael.
Thank you, Richard.
And I believe we move on. Lorna, if you'll correct me, I believe, or if you'll check me on this, Angela is next. Is that
Angela, yeah. Thank you.
okay. So the brief bio, Angela Alaimo O'Donnell is a professor, poet, and writer at Fordham University in New York City. Her publications include 2 chapbooks and 7 collections of poems. This poem is called My Father's Hand. It's on page 6. And I'll defer to you, Lorna. Do you think it would be better if I commented afterwards, or would you like to hear my notes first?
Whichever's up to you. I think.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do my little introduction, and then you'll get the poem. So this is called My Father's Hand, and it's a story indeed, and it doesn't evade the complexity of emotion, that is of true emotion. As so often happens in memorable poetry, we see the speaker's multiple perspectives as a child and as an adult remembering childhood. In the child's perspective, the hands, the dexter and the sinister, loom so large that each may obscure the other at the moment. We hear the memories of the left hand, the one that expressed love, and yet the memories of that other hand are not entirely suppressed. It's an honest and very, very moving poem that recognizes our two-handed nature. And let me praise as well the adroit, pun intended, use of rhyme, so subtle and yet adding weight to the crucial words. And so, Angela, if you will read for us.
Thank you so much, Richard, for that beautiful introduction and those kind comments about the poem. And also thanks to Norma and to Alex for setting this up, and to all the editors involved for including my work in this beautiful issue of the journal. The poem, by the way, My Father's Hand, is part of a collection of poems that I'm working on that are about embodiment, the power and the beauty and the vulnerabilities of the body. And the collection is tentatively titled Talking to My Body, My Body Talks Back, which is kind of an homage to Anna Swer's wonderful book, the Polish poet Anna Swer's Talking to My Body. And so the poems are focused on my own embodied experience, but also the experience of those around me whose bodies connect and intersect with mine. And this particular poem focuses obviously on my father, my childhood fear of my father's body, the fact that my O'Donnell name is sometimes confusing. I'm not at all Irish, I'm Sicilian. And he was a typical Sicilian father, rather distant and detached and unengaged in our upbringing. I'm also, by the way, working on a novel on this subject about my parents. And the first line is, my parents should never have had children, so they had 5. Just a little background to the poem. In any case, as Richard has noted, but the poem is a sonnet, and I'll go ahead and read it. My father's hand. When I hear my name, Alaimo, I see my father's left hand, the one that wore on its 4th finger his gold wedding band. It was not the hand that hit us. That hand was the right. It was not the hand that held my mother's in the photographs, the 4 of us watching until we became 5. Too many kids to try to keep alive in those hard times without a salary to feed us with. It's difficult to tell how he managed it. He didn't survive our childhood. He was a quiet man and a poor one. This name, his gift to me, proffered by that hand that never hit me. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. According to my notes, Lorna, Sarah Carleton's poem is next. Okay. Sarah Carleton's first collection, Notes from the Girl Cave, was recently published by Kelsey Books. This poem is titled Ode to a Kind of Winter. It's on page 136 in your hymnal if you'd like to sing along. So my comments, the poem packs surprise on surprise for me, as the best poems do, surprises that make sense. There's a phrase, air like people, that puzzles me for the duration of a little punctuation mark, and then tepid and mostly water makes me think, of course. The personal note, from my location in the Pacific Northwest, where a wet December is the only kind I know, along with a wet October to April, the revelation that the poem is about Florida is another surprise that makes sense. A reminder that a rainy, calm, contemplative moment can happen anywhere. In the reference to Persephone, the poem has a wonderful moment of what Frost called extravagance, when the poet reaches far afield, in this case, way back to Greek mythology, to show us an image as alive today as it was millennia ago. It's one wonderful moment among many in the poem. So Sarah Carleton, if you'd like to read for us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Richard, and for all the nice words. And I am so honored to be among all these great poets and writers. So here it goes. Ode to a Kind of Winter. Nothing I love more than a wet December. Windows open, cardinals poking berries. Air like people, tepid and mostly water. Breathing is dreaming. Certain days, an eerily quiet soundscape settles over Florida's palms and live oaks. Lizards startle, squirrels from 2 streets over scramble in branches. Plus that extra layer of COVID calm from resting planes, an atmosphere free of mumbles. Clouds adhere to unruffled skies like blankets, lulling the raindrops. Pretty soon, the snowbirds will flee their white mess, driving here in road salt encrusted metal, making our peninsula extra human for a few months, as local folks abandon their caves of Freon, knowing that Persephone dwells above ground. Children chase, and bicycle riders roll to dinner smells drifting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do believe my Next, we have Nicole Caruso Garcia. So Nicole Caruso Garcia is a poetry editor at Able Muse. She's a Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominee. Her collection Oxblood is forthcoming from Able Muse in 2022. And this poem is called Burden Blues. It's on page 14. I'm fascinated with the way that this poem explores language as it explores the feelings associated with an object. The jewelry becomes richer in meaning as its literal value diminishes, and the words are enriched and nuanced by the experience. The slight off rhyme of bear and year seems perfect here. You'll hear it when you hear it. It's a slightly discordant note to go with the dissonance of the experience. Language and world moving side by side, changing, shaping, and influencing one another is among the essential things that poetry does, and I think this poem does it very, very nicely. So Nicole, if you will read for us.
Thank you, Richard. Burden Blues. I thought my burden was bespoke couture, a lace yoke made to measure, haute couture. Then I saw 10 like it at the Goodwill store. A pack horse saddlebagged, the burden cruel. The nuggets must be gold, a mite less cruel. Turns out they're iron pyrite, I'm the mule. No common crown of thorns could this queen bear. Yet now I grasp the cap and bells I bear. I've been an April fool 12 months a year.
Thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole. Nicole will be introducing the next 4 poets after we have Rhina P. Espaillat. We've now opened the door to poetry. We have our featured wonderful poet here with us. Rhina is Dominican born. Rhina P. Espaillat has published 13 full-length books, 4 chapbooks, and 2 CDs, comprising poetry, essays, and short stories in both English and her native Spanish, and translations from and into both languages. Her work, which appears in numerous journals, anthologies, and websites, has received many national and international awards, including the Richard Wilbur Award, the Nemiroff Prize, the Eliot Prize, awards from the New England Poetry Club, the Poetry Society of America, the Frost Foundation, various honors from the Dominican Republic's Ministry of Culture, and a Lifetime Achievement in the Arts Award from Salem State College. Espaillat is a founding member of the Fresh Meadow Poets and Powwow River Poets, the Melopea Trio, and the quintet known as the Diminished Prophets. So we're very, very, very thrilled to have you here with us, Rhina.
I'm delighted to be here in such good company and hearing such wonderful things being read. And with my friend Alex Pepple, who is, I call him always Saint Alex, because he has patience with everybody, including me, although I don't understand anything about this kind of communication. I think it's witchcraft, but he manages it very well. And I thank him for that, as for so much else. He's also been the best friend of the Powwow River Poets, which I co-founded 100 years ago. And he has done a beautiful job of our second anthology. I also want to thank someone who is not here, at least I think she's not here, and that's the interviewer, Deborah Warren, who is a magnificent poet. And I'm sorry that she is not in this issue because she deserves to be in everything. I have 11 lines of hers, and I hope that nobody will mind if I take just a minute, a second, to read why she is such a good interviewer. Because she doesn't miss anything. She misses nothing. She called me for what she said was a little conversation. And during that little conversation, she wormed out of me everything that I care about, that I'm passionate about, and it all came out in the interview. And this is the way she writes, is the way she thinks. Intersection. A girl pulled up in the lane beside me, smiling in a luminous private sphere, playing across her lips some scrap of thought, a joke on the radio, a memory, some plan or fantasy, and passed inches away, her profile perfectly clear, but sealed inside a membrane of safety glass, and every inch between our cars a light year. Her invisible itinerary, one moment tangent to my own, and caught glancing off into another galaxy. She will see everything that's glancing off in all directions around her, and I thank her very much for being that observant and that caring. I'm going to read, well, let's see how much I have. All right. I'm going to read something called On the Avenue. And the Avenue, of course, is Fifth. I'm a New Yorker, used to be. On the Avenue. I said to God, it was a windy day, and we were waiting for the light to change on 59th Street, where Black coaches wait for tourists and dejected horses pay little attention to the passing scene. I said to God, look at these creatures. Fate, that is your will, stranded them on the dung heap of this life. I'm sure you could arrange something more suited to their speed and grace than midtown tours and lunch out of a bag. And while I have your ear, the light was green, and we strolled on, the plaza on our right and on our left breakdancers. That gray hag there, with her entourage of pigeons, face like a map of madness, ankles blue with bodies riot thick in every vein. Is this what living earns? Is this your view of what old age deserves? That boy, delight miraculous in every move, performs for shifting crowds, and having danced and sung his hours away, scoops up his change and moves along. Is this your plan for us? The end of miracles. I tell you as a friend, but there are those who say the cosmos proves you have grown callous to our sort of pain and have perhaps forgot your own. Or worse, never did know the fleeting thing that warms us wearers of flesh and rule us from above without the common hurt that couches love. This is no way to run a universe. God mulled his answer as we ambled south in silence, past the shops, Bendel to Saks, and then he turned to face me, and his mouth released a spate of starlings, and a peal of bells, and tiers of dressy shoes, and stacks of books on sale at Doubleday, and rows of steaming carts with shish kebabs, meat pies, and every meretricious face the good has ever worn. Ah, slippery old deal, I thought, and laughed. What politician knows how to embroider pseudo-argument out of non-sequiturs like you? We should be angry with you. Oh, the friends you take like books borrowed forever. Laws you make and fail to keep. Injuries you invent to justify returning each sad prayer to us unopened. But what's friendship for if not forgiveness? So I let it pass, indulged him as he uttered fountains, grass, Johann Sebastian on steel drums, and more genial evasions. We resumed our walk, trading impressions through the darkening air, to the amusement of some 2 or 3 who, disbelieving what the eye can't see, missed God in the clear robe of his disguise, and skeptical of solitary talk, enjoyed my gestures, thinking me alone above those skaters on their lake of stone. So one of my many conversations with the Lord. And here is, I'll finish with guidelines. Here's what you need to do since time began. Find something diamond rare or carbon cheap, it's all the same, and love it all you can. It should be something close, a field, a man, a line of verse, a mouth, a child asleep that feels like the world's heart since time began. Don't measure much or lay things out or scan. Don't save yourself for later you won't keep. Spend yourself now on loving all you can. It's going to hurt. That was the risk you ran with your first breath. You knew the price was steep, that loss is what there is since time began subtracting from your balance. That's the plan. Too late to quibble now. You're in too deep. Just love what you still have while you still can. Don't count on schemes. It's far too short a span from the first sowing till they come to reap. One way alone to count since time began. Love something. Love it hard. Now, while you can. And I think Ace, I do have time for one more. Let me read Here. This is a sonnet called Here. Everything's here, unused but orderly, as if ready for use. A mint or two, his nail clipper, the little scissor he trimmed his mustache with, scribbled things to do. His watch, a neatly folded handkerchief that spills a scattering of change, the pen that leaked into his pocket now and then. I almost hear him now. Don't touch, as if I were pilfering his tangled hearing aids. This snarl of keys, his red Swiss Army knife hiding its tiny arsenal of blades like legs tucked under. Glasses, wallet, wife. Each item's here, though useless as it is, I don't know why, except that it was his. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rhina. I think I'd love to have you for a whole day to speak to you about your poetry and your interview. I'm just going to ask one question before we go on to the next is Lee Bahan with translation. When I'm looking over your interview, it's lovely the journey you have with poetry. It started off as a game that adults play with mysteries to it, a strange vocabulary and odd rules. And then you realized with the simple poem Little Boy Blue how the poems can hurt you too. You can dig deep. But then you go onwards and you still have this playfulness that, you know, what if when the poems show up, they'll announce themselves and be recognized complete with flaws that you need to revision, which is also part of the game and the fun. So I just want to ask you, do you think as writers, as poets and writers, it's better if you don't take yourself too seriously? You become a better writer if you see the fun in it.
Well, I think if you take yourself about as seriously as you take other people, that's about right. But if you take yourself more seriously because you are a poet, you know, then you're not really communicating. And what I'm interested in is not so much writing something that will make people applaud and will make people say, oh, this is fantastic. What I really, really want most is communicating with other human beings. And not just at the level of pass the butter or what time is it, but at the inside level where it really counts, where it's very hard because you're talking about things when you write poetry, talking about things that you really can't put into words. Language is one thing, but communication is another. And this is one of the things I was talking about with Deborah Warren, that she doesn't need the language as much because even her body language gets into the poetry and you know she understands what you're thinking. So that for me is the poet.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say that you said about translation that it is impossible, but it is also inevitable. So with that, I'm going to introduce Lee Bahan. So Lee, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. You're on mute now, Lee, so you might want to unmute. Yeah.
In southern Indiana, it's pronounced Bahan.
Oh, Bahan, okay.
You aren't from there, don't worry.
So Lee Bahan is the author of 2 chapbooks of poetry, as well as 2 collections of translations of Petrarch's sonnets, A Year of Mourning, Able Muse Press 2017 named a special honoree for the 2016 Able Muse Book Award, and To Wrestle with the Angel, Sonnets from Petrarch, chapbook of 1337. Lee continues to bulldoze to Petrarch's Requiem and Vulgaeum Fragmenta, now translating Sistenas and Sonnets, which scholar Thomas Roach identifies with the Christian seasons of Advent and Lent. She and her husband live in a 100-year-old farmhouse outside Medora, Indiana. Okay, Lee, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, when I was placed after Rhina, it's like, that's easy to remember and really hard to follow. I don't cry pretty. I'm reading a sestina, which I took off. After a year of mourning, I went on to just go ahead and do the Lent poems, and all of a sudden, whatever it is that makes us do funny things, said, you should go back to the sestinas. I had done a draft of this sestina, 30 years ago, and I'm really glad it was destroyed in a flood. I had no business attempting it at that time. So I thank you very much that you all think it's worth doing now. The title refers to when Job's wife says, curse God and die, which is possibly the dumbest advice ever given under the circumstances. Virgil, it's when Aeneas goes down into the wood of people who had horrible luck in love, and Dido had committed suicide. And Alicia Stallings, page 69 of the wonderful book Like, which we all own. And Cano, this is a joke to pay Rhina back for making me cry. Cano is the French poet who did the Sestina algorithm. April 27, Job, Virgil, Stallings, Cano. The time for creatures which inhabit earth, not counting species hostile to the sun, to be about their business is all day. But later, when the sky ignites the stars, one heads home and the other for the woods, to bed down and to rest, at least till dawn. And never, as incomparable dawn begins to shake the shadow off the earth, waking the animals in every wood, has respite from my sighs come with the sun. Then, at the sight of scintillating stars, I pace and weep and wish that it were day. When twilight ousts the clarity of day, and our dusk equals another people's dawn, I consider the irreligious stars, which have had their way with my soft earth, and curse the first time that I saw the sun, which makes me look like a man reared in the woods. As savage a beast never grazed in the woods, I don't think, nocturnally or during the day, as she who draws my tears in dark and sun, a flow which nodding off won't stanch, nor dawn, since, while mortal of body and holy earth, I still desire at the approach of stars. Before returning to you, luminous stars, or going down the hatch to lust's dim woods, leaving my corpse to crumble into earth, I'd like to see compassion in her, a day of which could recompense years, and by dawn have been enriching me since setting sun. If only she and I could watch the sun go down and not be seen except by stars for just one night, and that not end at dawn, nor she be transformed into leaves and wood to slip from my arms, much as on the day that Apollo chased her across the earth. But earth will be over me boxed in wood, and day glitter with little bitty stars, before a dawn that sweet heralds the sun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great. Thank you. Now I'm going to give the floor over to Nicole Caruso Garcia, who will be introducing the next 4 poems. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Lorna. So I will be introducing the next 4 poets and their poems. First is Mary Romero, joining us from Chattanooga, Tennessee, where she works as a teacher, writer, deacon, and mother. Her poems have appeared in Measure, Birmingham Review, Mezzo Cammin, and elsewhere, and her chapbook, Philoxenia, won the Lucy Shaw Prize. Her first full-length book of poems, Loom, explores the voice of Penelope along with other women in the Odyssey, and is forthcoming from Finishing Line Press. You will find Mary's poem on page 2, gorgeous with its lovely inversions of roots and constellations, but that's tempered with Penelope's self-awareness and her imperatives that strike the reader. Mary?
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to read today. So humbling to get to read after Rhina, who is a real hero of mine. So thank you. This is Penelope and just a note on this in case it's been, since high school that you read the Odyssey. Odysseus famously built he and Penelope's marriage bed around a tree that was still rooted in the ground. Penelope in the bedroom built around a tree. My hands, with nothing else to touch, linger along the grains of our bed frame, as firm and smooth to stroke as muscle cloaked in skin, immovable. You carved it from a trunk of olive. Its roots, like a constellation of stars, still stretch beneath it, gripping ground, as if we too were lifted by a net of light each night, lying above a burning meteor, a relic of petrified, once dripping sap. Dust motes also flicker amber in a crack of light that beckons in the shape of you, which the curtains, drawn, quickly dispel. Without you, I fear that I am making you more perfect in memory, and therefore less. Your constant humming, your heavy footfalls in the morning, how they irritated me, appear, enrage me out of vapid apparitions. I want you as you, my beloved opposition.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. I love how you have made Penelope such a real woman in this poem.
Thank you.
Next, we have Susan McLean joining us from Iowa City, Iowa. Her first poetry book, The Best Disguise, won the Richard Wilbur Award, and her second, The Whetstone Misses the Knife, won the Donald Justice Poetry Prize. She is a professor emerita at Southwest Minnesota State University. You'll find Susan's rondo on page 96. And when she submitted this, I don't think she knew that I am the biggest sucker for a good pun. They tickle me and make me happier than a pun should be allowed to make a person. So enjoy the wit and also the delightfully piquant voice of the speaker. Susan?
Thank you. This poem was partly inspired by a favorite Cole Porter song called But in the Morning, No. And the title of this one is To an Early Riser. Not in the morning, please. You know how much I like to wake up slow. Without some coffee to unfreeze my brain and wake me by degrees, my ardor is extremely low. I don't need Wheatling or Merlot to make me more simpatico, just time. By noon, I'm fine, but please, not in the morning. So hold that impulse, Romeo, until I too can feel a glow as torrid as the Cyclades. We'll still have lots of day to seize and all the time we need, although not in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And I'm so relieved that you talked about the inspiration for the poem, because I was definitely afraid to ask that. And thank you for making me chuckle every time I think of the title. Next, we have Leona Sevick reading her poem, My Mother's Kitchen, that was a finalist for the Able Muse Wright Prize. Her first full-length collection of poems, Lion Brothers, won the 2017 Press 53 Poetry Award. She serves as a poetry reader for the Los Angeles Review and advisory board member for the Furious Flower Black Poetry Center. She is a professor of English at Bridgewater College in Virginia, where she teaches Asian American literature. You'll find Leona's poem on page 94, a piece that is both highly specific and universal. It is set in a place I consider to be the crucible of the home, and her poem reminded me why that is. Leona?
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks to Lorna and to Alex as well. My mother's kitchen. Spinning and spinning around her cluttered kitchen, reaching for the sesame oil in its stained metal canister, for black bean paste, the gochujang she keeps in giant plastic tubs in the extra refrigerator in the garage. I do my best with the dishes she made with ease and from memory, knowing mine are a rush job, a shortcut substitute for the meals my mother would have made. My daughter, a state away and still a teenager, would make better work of it, I know. For years, she patiently shadowed my mother in her kitchen, absorbing every word and direction without rancor or defensiveness, without the bitter impatience or stony silence I showed at her age and well beyond it. I can see her now, standing barefoot at the stove, stirring dubu jjigae with a large wooden spoon, her hand balanced on her hip, just like my mother, serene and satisfied. Why is it so hard to love each other? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leona. That last line just comes out of nowhere at me and just really, wow. I love the tensions in this poem, and I find myself thinking, much like recipes, family relationships also can be messy at times and require lots of patience. Thank you for that. Next, we have Anne M.Thompson joining us from Washington, D.C. She has been honored with final, long list, or short list rankings in 10 literary contests since 2014. After a 30-year career as a technical writer-editor in global health and education, she, a Reiki therapist and teacher, now runs her own holistic wellness practice and serves on the board of advisors for the Center for Reiki Research. You'll find her poem on page 61, a poem that is both concrete and mysterious, a poem that juxtaposes the enduring and the ephemeral. Anne?
Anne, are you here? Okay, she's not here. Okay, so
would you like me to read her poem?
Sure, please, thank you.
I mean, I don't know if she would mind, but I have it here, so I'd be happy to read it.
Yeah, sure.
Murmuration over Gretna. All I know of Gretna is this scene on the front page of the Times below the fold. At first, it seems to be some prehistoric find, another grotte Chauvet perhaps, colliding spots of gray and black left by our ancestors on stone some 30,000 years ago. It is that beautiful. Seems filled with the same human desire that beckons and eludes us still as in our caves murky with fire, we left our coal and ochre marks on Paleolithic walls. The charred outlines of bison, ibex, horses, owls, those hands, the sacred birth canal. Yet this is neither human nor is art in any way but seeing it as such. The way the starlings swirl, then part to rise, converge again, and touch some outer edge, rebound, then spin upward, downward, back again, as if they sense what we can't see before, at last, they settle in the trees. And I loved how prior to reading this poem, I really didn't like murmurations when I saw video clips of them and things. I always thought it was kind of weird and creeped me out. But this poem completely, it just completely changed my view of that. And I am thankful for this poem, which is such a spot on illustration of the poet's lens and of how poetry is a different way of seeing. And now I turn things back over to Lorna.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks a million. It's going to go over to Stephen Gibson now, who's kind of going to take part. He's new to the newly appointed poetry editor of Able Muse, and I pulled him in to help, and he's been very gracious and kind. He's had three poetry collections published. And Stephen will be introducing the four next poets. Thanks a million, Steve.
Thank you, Lorna. Can everybody hear me all right? Am I coming through? Okay, thank you so much. It's very much a pleasure to be here and to be participating in maybe my first sort of official capacity as the new poetry editor for Able Muse. So thank you for the invitation. And it's very good to see so many faces of writers I have long admired and faces of writers I've long admired and known in some cases. It's lovely to see all of you. The first person that we are going to hear from is D.R. Goodman. I hope, if it's all right with everyone, I have decided to err on the side of brevity in my introductions. D.R. Goodman is the author of Greed, a Confession, and is a repeat winner of the Able Muse Wright Prize. And if I could say just a few words about the poem Wallet, which you can find on page 5 of the current issue. This elegiac poem delays one of its most surprising revelations until one of the last lines. And after that, it gestures toward not only the grief of the speaker, but also the grief of the speaker's mother. By doing so, it connects speaker and mother through the medium of shared and repeated sorrow, and invites considerations of whether the parent-child relationship is still intact too. All of these feelings arise out of the description of a simple daily object, a wallet left behind. D.R. Goodman.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Good, good, thanks. What an honor, both to appear in Able Muse Review and to read with all of these amazing writers. Wallet. My long dead uncle's wallet, duofold brown leather, overstuffed with notes and scraps, like anyone's, IDs and photographs, phone numbers, ticket stubs, receipts, an old prescription, but in someone else's name. A mystery, a life, as though he'd slipped his billfold from his trouser pocket, flipped it on the dresser yesterday, the same brown wallet they removed, perhaps with keys, his watch, a ring, and carried him away now 60 years ago. Beloved, this man, and lost at 39. And somehow these small, brittle fragments are enough today to light in me my mother's grief again.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Our next reader is Toni Treadway. When I was reading By the River, it occurred to me it is as hard to write a very short poem as it is to write a very long poem. The long poem challenges our powers of invention, but a short poem challenges our powers of compression. In this poem, we've compressed a narrative of hope and sorrow into 4 lines, reminiscent of the Chinese tradition, for me anyway, with its powerful, suggestive images. And I think the gentle hint of classical mythological river crossings also lends this poem a lot of richness. Toni Treadway is the author of Late Harvest and an active member of the Powwow River Poets. Thank you so much, Toni.
Thank you, Stephen. You saw things that I didn't know were in there. Always interesting. Very special for me. By the river. She pushed the paper boat out on the river and wondered how to make him live forever. She hoped to navigate to land together, but learned how paper founders, wet with weather. Thank you. An honor to be with old friends and to find so many new ones.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next reader is Leo Aylin. This poem is on page 12 of the issue. One of the pleasures of poetry is finding just the right word for a thing. And this poem begins with that sort of word, a word of utter precision, but quickly moves from it to the larger conceit of love that lasts for only a short time. I admire the flexible rhythms, which I hear as sort of a frosty and loose iambic and a pretty nimble tetrameter line, and the brinksmanship of this ballade variant, especially because the unexpected additional rhymes culminate in 2 words I think are just essential to the poem, glut and but. They're towards the end. Those are real transitional words, aren't they? Leo Aylin is the author of 9 collections and a BBC and ITV director, and really just check out Mr. Aylin's website because it is illuminating and amazing. Would you welcome Leo Aylin, please? Leo, you're still muted, so we want you to jump in there. There we go, thank you.
I was so frightened about not being muted throughout the evening. There's an old Gloucestershire word, from, for the moment when a pear is perfectly ripe. And this only lasts for about an hour, after which the pear becomes first morsy, then sappy, then roxy, and finally rotten. The Ballad of the From Pear. Come into my garden. It's humming with bees. It'll soothe your eyes that are prickly with glare. Forget your checkbook, papers and keys. Take a deep breath of lime tree air. Peer at the larvae in the water butt. Look at the robin's cheeky stare. I'll crack you my one ripe hazelnut. I'll pick you my one from William Pear. At the moment, I haven't got fruit-laden trees. I haven't a paddock with a chestnut mare trying out fences. I've got fine fleas from our local hedgehog with plenty to spare. There's 5 old nests in the broken-down hut with the 2-room ladder that does for a stair. Not a single one of my doors shut. But I have at this moment got 1 from pair. I could flourish my plume, fall to my knees, spout a hexameter lover's prayer, say that without you my brain would freeze, do the full act and tear my hair, present you my body, nerves, veins and gut. But you know I'm burning and hardly dare to touch you for fear of exploding fut. Sit down. Here, take my 1 from pair. From lasts an hour. So eat it, glut yourself on a perfect taste as we tear ourselves with love that is perfect, but lasts no longer than a from pair.
Thank you so much for that, Leo.
Thank you.
I believe our final poetry reader, at least at present, is Stephen Gibson. Stephen Gibson is the author of 8 collections of poetry. And if you're interested in reading along with this one, Little Dancer Aged 14, it's on page 122. Near the center of this poem, the speaker invokes a beeswax figure which has been x-rayed. I think the attentive reader might feel this whole poem is like an x-ray of a work of art that has many more layers, physical and cultural, historical and ethical, than it seemed. Generally speaking, I admire any poem that manages to add resonance to a work of art by providing its human context. But I especially admire one that reminds us that the art we make from the lives of children requires a special ethical sensitivity. Stephen, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Alex, and really thank you all reading. They've been wonderful, really wonderful. Actually, this poem started when I read an article about her being x-rayed and what they found inside her. Little Dancer, age 14, Edgar Degas, 1878-1881. In the National Gallery of Art, girls imitate her, standing like her, mirroring the teenager's pose, arms back, chin up, like Degas' beeswax figure. The younger girls especially, as each parent knows, their daughter wishing she could be that ballerina in her flat-chested bodice, tutu, slippers, her clothes. What she wishes, begging mom to take her picture beside this miniature beeswax figure, is to be her, to live the life she's imagined for Degas' teenager. Marie Genevieve Van Gotham was a ballet extra of Belgian parents with older and younger sisters. Older, a prostitute, steals money from a customer. In a criminal report, she mentions younger sisters, Marie, extra at the Opera Ballet, and a younger one. It's one of the last mentions of Marie that appears. Their flat was in a district notorious for prostitution, an area in Paris where immigrants flooded in, poor, doing what was needed. Selling sex was a profession, what Marie's older sister did, as did extras at the opera. Many girls just as poor, nicknamed ballet little rats for the scurrying steps across the floor in their slippers, who put out for the wealthy donors who expected that. You see them lining the walls in Degas' paintings, some holding their walking canes, wearing top hats. Marie was a 7-year-old during the Paris uprising, the Commune, when the government waged war against its own people, and Versailles used everything to bring the city under control. Degas' Little Dancer lived through starvation so severe, people ate pets. Some wealthy would eat the elephant at the zoo later, served in a few exclusive restaurants as if veal cutlets. They ate all of the edible animals in Paris's Jardin de Plantes, as the poor Lauren stew was for rats, called gutter rabbits. Paris's 1871 commune would later become romance. Marx declared it was the start of a world revolution that would finally see the proletariat rise up for once. But to 7-year-old Marie Genevieve, it was cannon demolishing whole areas, not only barricaded streets held by insurrectionists, but the wealthy regions. In some places, it looked like where Apollo 11 landed. In some surviving photos, there's nothing but craters where insurrectionists were. These photographed dead were lined up in boxes with numbers for photographers. This is what Marie Genevieve lived through as a little girl. This is what was remembered by Degas' little teen dancer when Degas singled out this ordinary girl to be his model, a teen who, according to management, was unremarkable, an extra at the ballet whose problem was being punctual. If anything, whatever his political views, Degas, practical to a fault, was extremely frugal with his beeswax figure, which had been x-rayed. Inside are old paintbrush handles tied together with roped wire that were used as armatures to stiffen and connect limbs, and corks from wine bottles he used to fill her chest, stomach, and other hollow areas. This beeswax figure's head, the size of a child's large doll, Degas secured to her torso through her neck with metal, then lengthened the neck more by straightening the coil. This is the 1/3 life-size figure admired by little girls, who wasn't well received when Degas finally showed her. At 1881's Impressionist exhibit, she is declared horrible, with her squinting eyes and flattened forehead, features seen in Aboriginals and Central or South American natives whose moral capacity at birth was considered impaired, resembling an Aztec or some kind of depraved creature in whom every vice known to man was seen in her face, which turns up with insolence and spite. This commoner, whom critics said that with her showing, Degas disgraced himself as an artist by trying to pass this thing off as art. Even if it was a joke, they added, it needed to be replaced. Degas never again showed her. Taking criticism to heart, he relegated her thereafter to some corner in his studio, and although he worked on her off and on after, not art, a figure study, Marie's wax creator would never know that after his death, bronze casts would be made of her. She was shown just once and never again in any show. Of 150 statuettes found in Degas' studio, Ayres had 74 cast in bronze, including this beeswax figure he treated as a study, uncertain what to make of her. Not long after Marie Genevieve posed, she disappears. There's a record of her many absences, and a year or so later, she is dismissed by the Paris Opera Ballet, an extra among many for whom employment would come and go, and for whom their lives afterward, as during, aren't clear. Many today seeing her see innocence, but do not know about her being a girl living through the hell of civil war, the Commune, or Franco-Prussian War months earlier, or what realities would later come crashing down on her. 1, that opera rats were often pimped by their mothers. Another, employment at the Paris Opera Ballet was hard and management replaced you with a snap of the fingers. 3rd, an extra's pay was piss. Marie likely had another job, which would explain her absences, which wasn't as hard as being a ballet petite rat. One more dancer easy to discard. Coda. Out of tears, French president defeated communards with bayonets and cannon. And Paris's gorgeous scenery today, to suppress future insurrection, has wide boulevards. Maybe, like Degas' fingerprint seen in the wax, the reality of Marie Genevieve might be more known, like his study, and not hidden, like paintbrushes and corks we don't see. In time, that would be something to add to a child's memory. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And apologies, Stephen Kampa, for my befuddlement earlier. I think I named you Stephen Gibson.
It's okay. I just thought I got demoted immediately.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't
all
have
this
blamed you. I
poetry
would
has
have
just got
understood.
me. It's hard to, you're in a different world with all this poetry. So apologies. It won't ever happen again, I promise. I think we have time. We have Estelle Pollock and E.D. Watson. If they're here, I want to make sure that they're here. Are you here? No. They're on. Okay. So I do not think that they are here. So I think now we can go into question and answers for anybody who wants to ask the reader questions. And so does anybody want to go first? Anybody have a question for any of the poets or authors that they would like to ask?
I'd like to ask Mr. Gibson if when he first started working on the poem, did he envision it in the form it is now in, or did he have some other ideas at first? Because it's a fairly involved narrative, which is well handled, and I can see a number of ways it could have gone. So I was curious to know if he had maybe other revisions beforehand and then settled into this form as the best.
Michael, what I did was I'd written several sonnets, and I had sequenced them, and then I started working again, reworking the material, and then the terza rima. I thought it was going to be another sonnet, but then the terza rima suggested itself, and I decided to follow it where that narrative now would take me, and so it allowed for me to bring in some of the politics of the Franco-Prussian War. I mean, they overlap, so I'm leaving a lot of out, but it allowed me to follow those trains as well as bringing in what Marie must have lived through, not only what she experienced when she was 14, but when she was a little girl, like what's going on in Ukraine right now. I mean, it's just it just absolutely and we know children are going to experience that and have to live with that too. So that's it derived out of other works that I was actually working on as well.
But there is a relationship between terza rima and the sonnet. Robert Frost has one, and I did one in imitation of his. So there is a relationship between those two things, because as you can see, you can have your 12 lines and then your couplet.
Yeah. I don't know if am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. And the thing about that is when you follow the sestina, the terza rima, it pulls you along in the way that the sestina, and to go back to that, the sestina, you're looking both forward and backward. Mm-hmm. And so the narrative there is different. The sonnet wants to pull you to that conclusion. The terza rima pulls you forward, and you have to at some point conclude. Mm-hmm. I think that's what happened to me.
Wow, that's a really nice analysis.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, this is Mark Stone. I have a question for Mr. Leo Aylin.
Yeah.
I love that poem about the from pair. I'd like to read it. Is it online somewhere?
Yes, it's in quite a number of places. I think there's more than one. I don't know if I'm on speak or whether I'm mute.
No, wait, I can hear you.
It can be heard on YouTube.
Okay.
It has actually been in a show in the theatre which I did. I created something called an assortment of Sibyls for the actress Prunella Scales and myself, a sort of man and woman thing, and it came into that.
All right, thank you. I'm going to look at, and what is the exact title of the poem?
The Ballade of the From Pair, because it's in the strict ballad form. I mean, the thing about any strict form is that it tells you how to write the poem, which is always nice. Helps you.
Wonderful. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to ask Mr. Aylin what the words meant originally. I've never heard of from or the other three words either. Do they have a meaning in some other language?
No, it's English. But it's a bit old English. That's all. It's the rural dialects that we still find.
Which dialect?
We still find use of the old rural dialects, which probably won't be known to anyone outside that particular area. On the other hand, some of these words, which are, of course, basically local, get taken over by the nation. I mean, obviously Cockney became sort of a lingua franca. And David Jones, the poet David Jones, who wrote in parentheses about the First World War, he had this wonderful remark that Cockney is to the language of the army like Latin to the medieval church.
Well, I love the sound of strange words, and I had a course in Anglo-Saxon and loved it.
No, your poem was exceptionally useful to me this week. I'm working on more translations, and I read that poem and I'm going, the pun is ripe. It's like, yes. Okay, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Delightful, delightful.
Sorry, I just want to ask Nicole to talk about her poem because I love it. I love this idea of the restraint of couture and this restraint of, and then this kind of idea of acceptance, but with the acceptance comes a kind of madness. And so this, it had, you know, can you just talk to me about that a little bit?
Sure. This was one of the last poems that I wrote for my manuscript, which will be published soon through Able Muse, that I'm so excited about. But this poem is really about problem, not literal burden, literal physical burdens or things you're carrying, but you know, problems in the way that you can think that you have a problem that somehow makes you special, or like you're the only one who's ever had to carry this particular thing or in this particular way. And then realizing that no, that's not the case, and how foolish, you know, the speaker feels in that sense. But when I was thinking about, well, like what objects and you know, do I use for this poem? Whenever I'm writing a poem, it's like I feel like I'm inhabiting a place or a room. Like I have to walk around in it to figure out what objects are there and what I'm going to use. But what I was seeing in my mind was clothing, you know, articles of clothing, and the way that like an ox would have a yoke and be bearing the cart and the load or the plow. And then I thought of, like, you know, the goodwill image. But then when I thought of like how some people might think, and especially poets might think, that their particular burdens are valuable or useful in the sense that we can turn them into art and kind of smith them into something else. And so then I had that image of the gold, and, you know, they've got this pack horse, and it's, oh, maybe this is something good, something I can use. But then no, like sometimes our drafts don't turn out and it just ends up being fool's gold. And then the image of the crown being like the court jester, foolish cap. And so like the speaker can't quite figure out what she's what she has to work with, what she's bearing. But in the end, just arrives at the conclusion that she's is or has been very foolish. So.
Yeah, I like the timelessness of it too. I mean, goodwill is there thrown in the first verse, but without that, you could feel that, with the pack horse saddlebagged and the crown of thorns with the screen bearer. I kind of get this medieval feel of it, and then there's goodwill store thrown in it, which just blows that out. So I love that too. That's cool. Thank you. Rob, did you want to speak?
Yeah, actually, I have a comment to make or a question to Rhina. I just love your villanelles. I think you just do them better than anyone living, I would say, in my opinion. And I always wonder whether, because your lines, the repetitions of the lines so often feel forced and not in yours. And I wonder if you have a notebook where you collect them, or you hear a line and you think, I can use that one, and then I can use it again, and I can use it again, and I can use it again. Because I do that sometimes. I write a line and I think, oh, that's great, that'll work, and I'll be able to repeat that, and it almost never does. But
I'm not that disciplined. Generally, things come to me while I'm at the sink washing dishes or seasoning chicken or something. And I'm writing all the time, but in my head. And I don't write things down until the whole first draft of the poem is in there. I can't write pieces of it, because if I write any piece of it, it just goes. It goes away. And it feels that I've been rude. I've rushed it. But the thing is that the two lines that repeat sometimes come together. I think of them together, and then I wonder, why did these two come together? What do they have in common? What is it they mean to say? What are they saying to me that I'm not understanding yet? And before I write anything down, I get the rest of it. But sometimes I don't know until the very last line of the poem what it is I'm thinking. I just listen inside. I listen internally, and I let the poem do whatever it wants, and just keep up with it if I can. And then afterward, the critic moves in, but the critic is another fellow, and the critic is very disciplined. And sometimes I wish I could kick him out, but of course he's very necessary, so he stays.
I love that your critic is a male. When I was reading that, and it's this other part of yourself, it makes me think of being in yang, but like, is that a deliberate thing, or is it just how you think of it?
I can't answer for any of it. That's just the way it is.
I'd like to borrow him for a while, have him.
I love the idea of the villanelle being an exploration of what you don't know. I'm going to keep that one. Thank you.
Well, I think most poems are, at least for me. I hear drums first. I hear the meter first, and there's no words in it. Or it's just something that I used to dance to when I heard my grandmother reciting her poems. I would dance to it, but at the age of 4, when I started to fall in love with poetry, I couldn't keep up with it, what the grown-ups were reading or speaking, because it was all about dreadful deaths and curses and familial tragedies and what have you. So it was all beyond me, except that I could dance to it. And in order to dance, you have to have percussion. So I heard drums. And it wasn't until I started to write in English that I understood that poetry had a serious side, that it was about more than just dancing and clapping your hands.
Another one of the poems, Rhina, that you read that I love is the poem Here, about all of the objects that your husband left behind and you see every day. It made me think of actually another sort of object that you mentioned when I was at your house a couple of years ago, the big blonde. Have you ever
Yes.
about the big blonde?
Yes. My husband told me, even before we were married, he said, you have to understand that I have a big blonde. I said, oh, how dreadful. What a thing to say to a bride. And he said, well, she's imaginary, but I said, well, that is no excuse. Imaginary schminaggery. this big blonde has to go. But she never did. Every time I left the dishes in the sink or something like that, I used to go to the Westchester conference and come back, and I'd find things on the floor and clothing unwashed and so on. I say, what happened here? What is this mess? He says, well, the big blonde doesn't do laundry. So.
Well, I hope she shows up in one of your poems.
He shows up in a lot of my poems. Yes.
So, Rhina, it's really wonderful to see you.
It's wonderful to see you too. You'll have to come back and visit again.
Yep.
Oh, this is a treat. This is a real treat.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Alex, for providing this.
Oh, you're welcome, Rhina. After all, it's your issue because you are the centerpiece as a featured poet in the issue.
That's right. Oh, that was my birthday gift.
That's right, eh?
My birthday gift. I thought.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, thank you. I thought sometimes, my birthday was so much fun. It lasted about 2 weeks. And I thought, it's a good thing that you don't get another year every time you have a celebration. Because I would be Methuselah by now. I had so many parties and so many. I think it would be a good idea if everybody started out born at the age of 90. Because all the friends give you such a sense of self-assurance, because you're wonderful. All your friends tell you so, and they wouldn't lie, right? Friends don't lie. So you feel so great that you can sort of manage to age backwards and go back through all that awful teenage stuff, where you worry about your looks and you're not smart and you're not good looking and you're not tall enough and so forth. But, if you started at 90, it wouldn't matter.
That's what Merlin did. He lived backwards.
Well, you see, he knew what to do.
A smart guy.
I love the variety of all the poems read here today. That was delightful.
Yes.
What a collection! What a collection of marvelous poems.
They were wonderful, and yours were wonderful.
Well, I love Toni Treadway's because she has this gift. She's one of the powerhouse, Toni, and she has this gift for taking something tiny and packing something big in it.
It is beautiful.
Like that little four-liner.
That was a beautiful poem.
Yeah. That was perfect.
Yeah.
When I read Toni's, I thought immediately of Moses being saved in the basket, and then we have the last person. It doesn't end as you expected, so it was wonderful that 4 lines just of a surprise.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes those little things really, really pack up a punch.
Thank you. I'm going to take this opportunity to say Rhina's poem Guidelines is the centerpiece of a triptych that the local community chorus is doing as a commission of 3 poems to make a series of songs for adult chorus plus youth chorus plus orchestra. And so by December, we will have learned and performed that in honor of her 90th birthday. And it's extremely exciting because until September, when the composer is done, we do not know what we're starting with and what she's done with Guidelines and what she's done with Cycles and what she's done with my great-great-grandson, the Space Pioneer, in Spanish, which will be for the young people. And I just hope every community chorus everywhere will start figuring out that they've got to take some of the different poems that are around and set them to music and make them even more pervasive. It's just,
are you going to make a CD?
Oh, I don't know. It's some of the music that we do we're not allowed to, the formal music and that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
but we can certainly
that
make
would be great, though. That would be
we
great.
can certainly make a pirate recording of just the Rhina part. There's no reason not to.
Don't get arrested, though.
I'll have to ask the maestro to put that in the contract with the composer. I'm sure she'll post it to her website.
I think that all the arts kind of combine to provide something that is bigger than any one of them by itself. I love the melopea for that reason. I've been doing melopeas with another poet and a guitarist, and now we have a wonderful cellist and bassist. And it's just beautiful to listen to words with music, not behind them or in front of them or on the side, but right next to the poetry. And that's the way it works. The melopea is a wonderful thing because both of the arts owe something to the other, and they work together. My grandmother taught me that.
Tell them what you did last night with the five of you.
Oh, you tell them.
Oh, it was a melopea for the ages. It was very as Alfred Nicole, the other poet who reads with Rhina and that, said to the audience of about 50 that, and it was recorded because it was done in a venue that's a art space and a local city cable television place. So it will get posted to YouTube or something like that. But the fact of it was to be a celebration after 2 years of the COVID quarantine. And as Alfred said, the more and more we worked on it, the more and more we pulled poems and we pulled music that it was very dark. It was very atmospheric and dark and sometimes filled with grief. And but it was,
it ended funny.
It was, but it was so also deeply therapeutic, the combination of the music and the readers. So
well, that's because the poem always knows more than we do. The poem is really in charge. It's the poem that tells us what to do. If you try to, we were thinking, let's do something really cheerful, something to bring up the spirits of everybody who hears us. And it did not want to be written. It didn't want to be done that way. And it came the way it pleased, as it always does. And we started with all the grieving, because all of us have lost somebody or something. And then we went on from there to ridiculous fun, and it ended cheerful, I would say.
it was beautiful.
What are you up to next, Alex?
Well, for I guess the most upcoming thing is a tribute for one of our friends and colleagues. Most of you know her as Suzanne de Sola. So we'll be having a tribute for her with
yes. Oh, I
Westchester. We have a special panel at Westchester where she will be honored. And I'm co-chairing with Moira Egan. So that will be on April 9th. So that's the.
I'm going by Zoom.
Yeah, good. So those of you.
I'll get a ticket.
Me too.
Yeah, those of you who watch our newsletter bulletin, I'll have more news on that for everyone.
Oh, good. Oh, that was a wonderful idea. Everybody should go to Westchester, whether it's on foot or by Zoom.
And I can do it by Zoom also. So,
It's only by Zoom now.
It's only by Zoom now. They took away the other part.
But we'll have some interesting panelists like Clive Watkins, Alicia Stallings, Jonathan Post,
boy.
a few others. So they'll be, we'll all be speaking about Susan and reading some of her poems. And those of you who can make it, so it's going to be April 9 at 12 noon to 1 p.m.
I'll be there. And I'm giving the prize, the Rhina Espaillat prize. You know, I'm one of the prizes. They named one after me. But they have this wonderful contest every year, and young people are attracted to it. And those are my favorite people, and they turn up and they do such wonderful things. It's really terrific. Well, I want to put in a word for Westchester. Because the first time I went, I said, I have to come to this every year. I learned so much. There were so many wonderful people there, so many poets whose work I knew, but I didn't know them. And I said, oh, I'm with the grown-ups. It was a delight, just a delight to learn so much and to be encouraged to do more. Melissa was there. You were there. Several people were there. Susan was there.
Yes.
I was there.
Who are you?
Who is that?
That's Nigel.
That's Nigel, yeah. Rhina, we met many years ago at Westchester. We lost touch, but deeply sorry about that. But it's interesting
Yes, but
what
I
you're
don't
saying
see your
about.
face. I don't see your face.
I can't get. I haven't got enough bandwidth. I'm informed by the.
Can't get it to work.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
But do you feel about Westchester the way I do?
Yeah, I mean, I mourned terribly because I went quite a few times, and then it stopped. This is the first I've heard that it's back on again.
Yes, it's working. It's doing.
But did you say it was only online?
Only online. Only Zoom.
No, I
Okay.
think it's both. It's both online and in person.
No, they just put.
They took away the on-person part.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yes, it's all Zoom now,
Okay.
and we're all going to be pictures.
Okay.
Well, it was very sad because it was a wonderful occasion, and as you say, we could all meet. It was interesting you were saying about music and poetry in general. That I mean, it goes back to the Greeks. And what really kind of
Right. That's right.
frustrates me about today is that they had all these meters, and those meters were actually dance steps. So that most of the Greek poetry that we have in the plays, of course, were all sung and different dance steps. And I just wish that we could get back to that. I mean, maybe you'll start dancing with your group. That sort of wonderful idea of a whole variety of meters that you can use, and you can, dance to as well. It would be great if we could bring that back.
Well, no,
I often feel that Sorry, go on.
No, I just wanted to say that when you see Greek statues, some god holding a lyre on his shoulder, and obviously speaking to an invisible audience, that's a melopeia. That's what's going on. That he's not not singing, but speaking the poem with the music in the background.
Yeah.
Like Carrie does.
And it's interesting. I was really interested to hear you say that you compose it in your head beforehand, and even before that, you've got the rhythm as a kind of an idea going through your mind. And it's interesting that Coleridge and Wordsworth used to compose as they walked along and chatted and talked, and I don't think many people do that these days. I mean, most people sort of tap away at the typewriter, and I'm sure it has a detrimental effect. I'm sure many people will disagree with that, but I think that idea of having it in your brain, having those rhythms, is it's the secret of your success, Rhina.
I think poetry is written with the body anyway.
Yeah.
Also, about the conferences, I think there's also Poetry by the Sea. Maybe Nicole can tell us something about it because she's a board member.
Yes, Poetry by the Sea is back from its 2-year hiatus and will be happening in person May 24th through May 27th. So it's a Tuesday through Thursday. It's the week right before Memorial Day weekend. And registration is very modular. So if you want to show up for 1 day or 2 days or 3 or 4, Melissa will be doing her funny forms workshop, which is hilarious. My only regret is I already took it, and so I won't be taking it again, but it was super fun. So it's poetrybytheseaconference.org if you want more information, or send me an email if you have a question.
Nicole, I just put the Westchester link into the chat. If you could put that into the chat too, that would be great.
Sure.
And then people can look there if they want to link, because Westchester sort of changed its name, so it's a little bit bizarre to find.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Oh, Toni,
we're trying to advertise on social media, so on Twitter, on Facebook, we've been posting.
Well, some of us don't know what social media is, so
Right.
they live rather sheltered lives in the 16th century.
12th here. 12th century. Yes.
Well, I don't
Hello,
know.
this is-
Every time, Rhina, every time I come to workshop with those old words like thee and thou, everybody trashes me. So I don't know what century I'm in. I have secret poems with strange language. I don't show
You know,
you.
we should tell
Good
this
for
crowd,
you.
we should tell this crowd about the Frost Farm.
All right, that's another one we could put in.
Yeah,
Let me go get that link.
tell about that. That's a wonderful thing.
Frost Farm's going to be the third weekend in August this year. It's been pushed back because it's a state facility, and this is all a lot of the changes in dates has to do with the COVID presence in New England. But it's largely outside in tents, and occasionally some of the small classes get to sit in, for instance, his kitchen at the farm in Derry, New Hampshire. So it's succinctly a treat. It's also a very small conference. It tends to run about 100 people, wouldn't you say, Rhina?
I would say it's delightful because you get to meet everybody who's there.
It's really,
and it is mostly outdoors, and you get to look at all the parts of Frost's house. I saw the bed. Listen to this. I saw the bed in which the hired man died.
Yes.
Now that for a Dominican immigrant who has been in love with Robert Frost all her life, to see this is amazing. It really puts you into the life of the man and his characters. Some of who were real, some of them real characters, real people. And there it was. And the kitchen is it looks as if he were going to walk in the door. So I was right at home. It was wonderful.
Hyla Brook runs in the back of the farm, and this is the farm I believe where he tried to raise chickens, and ended up going to England, and then the first two books came.
Yeah.
So the first two books came from this period.
And one of
hello.
who's
Sorry,
here?
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say one of his trees died, one of his maple trees, and they cut it up into what they call cookies, which is little circles of tree about this thick. And they gave them out to some people. And I got one because I translated tree at my window tree. My sash is lowered when light comes on. So I have this treasure, and I got a pen and pencil set made of the wood from the same tree. What more could you want?
Mark, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. No, I just want to say I'm going to try out the Poetry by the Sea conference this year. I'm looking forward to it at the end of next month. And I signed up for the Funny Forms 3-day workshop, and I'm looking forward to that as well. Now, regarding the Frost Farm conference, I had a great time there last year. I'm thinking about maybe going this year. I keep going to the Frost Farm Poetry website to find out the exact schedule, because what time it starts and what time it ends would affect my flight times. And so my question is, when do you think the exact agenda, well, no, specifically the start time and the end time to the conference will be posted on the website?
I think you have to talk with Bob Crawford, and some of it last year he was quite hemmed in by what the state and its policies would allow in terms of public access. So he wasn't able to invent it until the very last minute. So
I see. Okay.
that allows it, but I'm sure it starts a late Friday and ends late Sunday.
Okay, probably just like last year.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you.
I hope you make it.
Thank you.
Such riches.
I've never seen such quiet poets.
Well, I was about to chime in. I just want to say all people talking about my 3 favorite poetry conferences ever. You've all described Westchester so well and the Frost Farm so well, and I love both of them. And I have to add, another thing you get to see at the Frost Farm is the outhouse. You too can see, where Robert Frost revised his. Anyway, I also want to I also wanted to say, just do a brief commercial for Poetry by the Sea, not my specific workshop necessarily, but the whole thing is just this very jewel-like setting. It's beautiful. It's right on the Long Island Sound. I know this is not at all important, but it is important. The food is amazing. And and the places where
important.
Yeah, it is very nice. It's very collegial, and I love it. I love all three of those conferences, and I'm very much looking forward to being back at Poetry by the Sea. Seeing you, Nicole, meeting you, Mark. I hope all three of these will just continue to thrive. They're so wonderful.
Do they have any?
Plug, Melissa. Yes, it's a very intimate and warm environment, Poetry by the Sea. So we're glad it's back in action.
Yay!
And Angela's going to be reading too.
Yeah.
Which am I missing? I'm like, who else is? Yeah, so a lot of good events. Marilyn
So
Nelson's our
excited.
keynote.
Oh, I
May I
adore Marilyn Nelson.
May I interrupt and say it's late, it's much later at night for me in England.
Oh.
And I have to get up early tomorrow. May I just say thank you very much, everyone. It's been a fascinating evening and good to meet you all. See you again soon.
Good to meet you
Thank
too.
you very much, Leo.
Thank
Thank you so much, Leo. Good to see you.
So long, farewell.
All right, I think I'm going to duck out too.
Okay.
Thank you, Rhina.
Great to see everybody.
Laundry to do.
Yeah.
Wonderful readings. Wonderful.
Great.
Good,
Thank
good
you.
night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Good
Thank
night.
you all.
Bye.
We'll give you the DMV next year.
Thank you, everybody.
Next year, and
Yes,
thank you all for coming. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alex. This is
Thanks,
wonderful.
Alex.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Emily, you said you were going to call me or you emailed me.
Oh, I'm going to email you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. You too.
Okay.
I miss you.
Thank you.
I miss you.
Lorna.
Bye-bye.
All right. So long, farewell.
everybody.
Auf
Thanks.
Wiedersehen. Good
Thanks,
night.
Alex.